Hello, welcome to our podcast. This is K Vision Podcast, where we have excellent interviewees and interviewers to give you motivation. And today is our season one, episode three, and we've got a wonderful guest all the way from USA, Dr. Susan Macdonald, who is a professor of ophthalmology. Thank you, Susan, for being with us, and over to you.
Thank you, Tina. Really happy to be here and have this discussion, which I think is really important to talk about career development and women in general. It's critical for us to all have a sisterhood and be sharing our support for each other.
Excellent. Okay, so to start with, I would like to go a little bit into your leadership as a woman. And can you tell us about a pivotal moment or a funny story towards your journey towards leadership?
Sure. I began my early on, I was an exchange student when I was 17 years old. And so I left. I had a very supportive family in the United States. I had came from a fairly big family. There were six children, and my dad was pretty progressive in the fact that he really wanted all of his girls to have an education. And this was in the late 70s. And so I always felt like my education and my being, I was always very much um, feeling that I had equality to men. But I was an exchange student to Mombasa, Kenya. And when I was there, the contrast of what women were allowed to do versus what men were allowed to do became pretty um, important in molding who I was and who I was going to become. And one day I was walking with some men that we were going out to dinner, and one there was a tradition that a woman walked behind a man, and I didn't realize that that was the culture of a man walking in front of a woman. So as we were walking down the street, I kept trying to make eye contact when they were asking me questions. So I kept like hurrying up and running up beside them to just be able to see their faces
Yes.
and to share what I wanted to say. And they would move a little faster. And so we were kind of in this jogging of running down the street because we were going to a restaurant, and all I could think of is, oh, we must be late. And it never occurred to me that I was that it was a cultural issue, right? Or
Yeah,
it was a gender issue.
yeah,
And it really impacted on me when I looked back. It took me years until I really looked back on it and said, oh my goodness,
yeah,
how
yeah.
I was very naive, but I was also raised in a way that I didn't expect to be walking behind anyone.
Yeah, exactly. So they felt that they were the leaders, so they should walk in front. And you were trying to catch up to talk to them, and they were thinking, what is this woman doing?
Right. Or they felt like, a woman's place was secondary to the men would walk ahead and talk, but they were like asking me questions. So, I mean, it just really has resonated to me as I've looked back on that of how fortunate I was to have parents who believed in me
Yeah,
and gave me this sense of a self-esteem that I was that my voice was important
yeah,
and that I my brains were, that I was a very smart person, and they acknowledged that. And really, my parents had me believing I could do anything, and that I think that's really a huge gift to give to your children. This idea that you have the ability to set out and set your goals high because you have the ability to achieve them.
yeah. It's really important, isn't it? Because they're your first leaders, if you like, when you come out, and it's
Yeah, and they can really, I think a lot of what you feel about yourself gets expressed as a leader as well,
yeah,
and you're having a really solid core values.
yeah,
Um, I was very fortunate to have great parents that allowed me to really see what I could do and dream, dream,
Yeah.
because I think that is, I'm living my dream right now. So
Yeah.
I think that's a
Amazing.
pretty exciting thing to actually look back on it in that way.
Excellent. So talk to us about some of those challenges you faced as you're getting to the part where you're living your dream, and you've made huge contribution for charity work and your work in Tanzania, isn't it? Talk to us about that.
Yeah, yeah. So, I lead a nonprofit in Tanzania that's just been incredible because we're bringing eye care to rural Tanzania. And when I say rural, that's 75% of the population lives in a rural region. So 75% of the population has no access or limited access to eye care. And, with blindness, or reduced vision, there's a whole set of social issues around that.
Yeah,
Depression, um, poverty,
exactly.
the ability to protect oneself,
Yeah,
the ability to protect your children.
yeah,
And so it really is by bringing eye care to people, you can really change lives. So I'm so proud of that. And I think when I look back at my life and the challenges, all of those prepared me for where I am today, right? And so one of the first things I have to say is the challenges are what made me grow stronger. The
exactly.
challenges are like, those are the things that really helped me define like how I would head forward.
Yeah.
So, I will say this, being a woman in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s, there were more men in
Mm,
powers, and there still are more men in positions of power. And
exactly.
so it's, to find your voice is it can be challenging sometimes. And, there's this I found a very narrow lane that I needed to stay into. And what I mean by that is that um, I wanted to be seen as intelligent. So being cutesy and flirty wasn't the right
Image.
approach,
Yeah.
obviously, of
Mm,
being a professional. But
yeah.
also then on the other side is being really strict and being super professional. You can come across being a bit of the B word and, like you're really not any fun. And how do you find your own voice in that? And you're too young to remember this, but women were wearing these, we were we were dressing like men, but trying to be putting this like female touch to it. And all women were trying to find that way of representing ourselves physically so that we wouldn't be seen as just women, but also professionally. And so I look back on it and I kind of laugh at some of the outfits I wore and some of the goofy things I did to try and make myself look more masculine or look more serious, where, you know, um, nowadays it's, people wear what they want to wear and, they show up in a very different way.
That's true. The culture's gone the right way, I think, now, isn't it? It's been you paved the way, you've done the hard work, and now it's much easier for us.
Well, and like I have a daughter who's just in her third, she turned 30. And so we talk obviously about feminist issues all the time. She's a leader in her own right. She's an amazing um, film director, but we talk about like what is that balance of expectation of your work environment
Mhm.
to be supportive of being a female, and the expectation of you don't want to be harassed. Like my definition of harassment versus hers are very different, and um, and how I sort of think that in some ways I'm more of a like I always thought about I wanted I wanted to have a seat at the table. That was all I wanted, to have a seat at the table to make big changes in this world. And how did I get that seat at the table?
Yeah.
And part of it is compromise, right? It's not calling out people every minute about you use the wrong, you should have, you know,
Piggy.
used the wrong pronoun or whatever. It's part of it was like meeting people where they were. And if someone was really inappropriate,
Yeah.
I called that out. But I probably put up with more than what someone would put up with today. But on the other hand, I've got a seat at the table and I have guy friends that were my mentors, that I didn't have female mentors. I had a couple of female mentors that meant a lot to me, but I also had some male mentors that were really great friends.
Yeah.
And I realized that they too were kind of tripping over how our culture was changing.
Yeah.
And as I was trying to find a way to find my balance, they too were trying to find a way to include me in the inner circle.
Yeah, no, that's great. And can you think of some challenges you've had where things completely went not the way you expected and it went wrong, or you thought it went wrong, and how did you handle it?
Yeah, you know, I think there was one time that I spoke up about an award,
Hmm.
and um, it was going to go to a woman, and someone wanted it to go to a man, and I spoke up, and I think it's one of the first times I was angry in a semi, it was a private meeting.
Yeah,
And I think, I thought, I looked back at that a lot, and I think what I did, speaking up was the correct thing to do. But I just wish I had rehearsed it before I said it. And it kind of came out like, you know, like,
it pushed you
like
too hard and you burst.
well, and you know what part of it was? I had just been at an opening session of the Academy of Ophthalmology, and they had just given out awards. And the only female on that stage, and this was, in the 2021, I think, the
Yeah,
only award they had given to a woman was there was a group that got the award, and it was the woman standing up there was a member of the group. So it
oh,
was all men, and I just couldn't believe that
yeah, it
this
wasn't
is
that long
where
ago.
we're at.
Yeah, this wasn't long ago, 2021, you said 3 years ago.
No, so yeah, so I walked away from that and walked into a meeting, and I was just like, it just was layering on top of me just being surprised at the lack of inclusion for women.
Yeah,
Um, so anyways, I had to kind of detangle myself from that and really, um, there were a lot of men at the table, and I certainly did not want to lose I think one of the things that women, when we're at the table, that we have a big responsibility to everyone else,
yeah,
not to, that there's a trust between when you're on a board, and there's a big responsibility of also you're representing women in general, I think. And so I look back on and I think, I better, and since then I've kind of worked on how I phrase things a little bit better so that it's not to make it personal to other people, and just more open and inquisitive than
and
you
personal.
know
Yeah, I see what you mean. Yes. And now let's talk about your proudest moment. What's your proudest achievement so far?
Oh, my proudest achievement. Well, I have to say, I have two great kids. So they are amazing. And I'm proud of, you know what I'm proud of? I am proud of how oh, I worked while I was a mom. And I also cut back my time as a mom. And I really think that those were two things that were challenging, right? One is to be working at a high um, demanding job. That was unusual. I didn't have a lot of neighborhood friends that were doing that.
Yeah.
Or school, in my kids' school, there were some of us doing it. But I
Yeah.
also think in the ophthalmology community or the medical community, my stepping back, and I still was practicing medicine and still operating a lot and
Yeah.
still having leadership positions. But I took a day off,
Yeah.
and then, a day and a half off a week to be with my family. And I I really am proud that I think that also is as a role model an important thing to show that life is sort of in chapters, and you need to adjust your life you adjust your job to fit your life, not adjust your life to fit your job. So I'm proud of that. And then obviously I am over the moon about ICOR and what we're doing in Tanzania. And the thing that I am really proud of is how hard we're working to bring care to families and specifically women. And we are real advocates of women, and we've tried many different ways to make sure that women get care equally as men do. And when I started 7 years ago, I would say only 36 to 40% of the patients were women.
Mhm.
And at this point now, we're 50-50. And I think that's extraordinary. And my Tanzanian team has just adopted this sense of, you need to take care of your mom, you need to take care of your sister.
Yeah.
And then I think the high quality of care that we're giving, we don't compromise on care at all. And we're bringing in some new technologies that are very inexpensive, like biometry, B scans. And I think we're probably really providing the best care possible in Tanzania to our patients. And we do it, and our patients are lives are changed forever. And we're doing about 2,000 surgeries this year, and we're seeing over 20,000 people. So I think that's pretty amazing. And the
Yeah.
final thing is, I really am glad I am at a point where I can use my voice to speak up for women in general. I have I just spent 3 weeks with three female residents, and I'm so happy to be with them and really just be a role model for them and talk to them about their role models. We were out doing outreaches, and there we've got these young school students, and for the men and the women to see women as doctors is really an important change that needs to happen for the world to really recognize that women have an equal place on this earth and deserve equal rights.
Excellent. Yeah. No, I was just going to pick up on a couple of things there. I remember reading a post that you have made in the recent past where you said you use your mom's skill to as your leadership. And let's talk to us a bit more about that. How did being a mom help you to become a better leader?
You know what? I think being a mom has made me a different person, right? Because I think being a mom is a tricky job. I mean, it's natural love. For me, I adored my kids, but I also knew I had to give them structure,
Mhm.
and I had to be disciplined, and so I see that that tight um, um, definition I had for myself maybe 25 years ago. I see it more now that I'm less afraid to show my feminine side and less afraid to show how I love and how spiritual I am about um, the value of, the power of one. And I see the power I can have by inspiring other people and working with other people and giving them the love and as a giving them the love to really let them know that I've got their back. And so I think that's a part of my leadership skills that defines me and makes me better at what I do is because um, I do have a big heart and I love to see other people succeed.
Amazing, amazing. I do similar work in Bangladesh, and I think the disparity is similar to Tanzania.
Yeah.
How do you keep yourself motivated to fundraise and take that work in such a big scale that you've done?
I have to tell you, Tina, I feel like I don't have, I'm not, I don't feel old, but I know I'm not young. And I feel like there's so much work to do. And I just feel like it's really important that we get busy, and I sort of sometimes I'm a little impatient about it because you know, I really believe the most important thing in the world is to take care of each other. And I really, that's my spiritual being. So I get fueled by it in many ways. And the other thing I see is when you bring other people in to what you're doing, that you can see the joy that it's lighting that in everybody's heart is like there's nothing better than giving without expectation. If you do something for someone with no expectation, it's better than a Chanel bag could ever be for somebody. And I would, I'm not a fancy bag person, but I'm telling, like, I just wish people would have that opportunity to really be selfless because that really is the biggest joy is to do something and not um,
Yeah,
expect anything in return.
yeah. And
You know that feeling, right? I mean,
feeling definitely, and that ripple effect you talk about. So if you help a mom, it kind of helps the whole community, doesn't it? And just having that joy and lighting up in their eyes, you can see it.
Yeah, and you also just think of the like honestly, what I spend a lot of time trying to do house visits and also really rural visits because it really unlocks um, and it challenges some of my beliefs. And what I mean by that is like, listen, I have never, I grew up in a family that we had 6 kids and we didn't, my parents were college educated, but we weren't poor. We were not poor.
Yeah,
But real poverty is something that, like, I look at moms and I see they love their kids just as much as I love my kids.
yeah.
And the idea that they can't protect them or
Mm,
that someone would hurt them
yeah.
or a woman who's blind is at higher risk of being sexually assaulted. I mean, I guess for me at this point, I'm like, how can I stop? I can't stop and I don't want to stop. And I just want to go faster and harder and work more.
Oh, that's lovely. I bet you take a lot of the flock with you with that motivation. That's great. So
Well, and for any of the women that are listening, you're all role models, and you're all, there's always someone in need in your community,
yeah,
and we can, you don't have to go to a rural place where I mean, there's poverty everywhere. It's probably less than 2 kilometers away from every place on this earth. And so I just sort of feel like, geez, the joy of helping another person is there. You just have to take it. And
yeah,
also know as women, we're role models for very young girls and boys.
yeah.
And we should really um, honor that.
That's it. We should bring up our boys together so they can fulfill that leadership and take women with us.
That's right. That's right. And I have to say, I have a son that is an amazing advocate for women. And I think a lot of that, he's an amazing guy. But he was raised by an amazing woman. So yeah, of course, he's going to have great respect for women. So, I sort of feel like that's our generation and your generation's responsibility is to really speak out for women and elevate the expectation about how men treat women. And in Bangladesh and in India, this is a
Yeah,
huge, huge issue that
absolutely.
men,
Yeah,
uh, there are some um, um, deaths of women that are unnecessary. And I just really think we need to use our voices.
definitely. So I know what I would say or describe your unique selling point to be, but what would you say your unique selling point is?
My unique selling point about me is that I'm determined and I'm successful and I love what I'm doing. So I think that um, and I'm having success. ICOR is very successful, and I think it's because I'm a woman. It's that successful, to be really honest with you.
That's amazing, amazing. So I wanted to ask you if you could talk to your 20-year-old self, what would you tell her?
Don't worry. I've
Hmm.
never been afraid in my life. I am not, actually, I love challenges, but I am a worrier. And I worry um, over silly things. Worrying is a waste of time. Action is, the real, not, don't waste, don't waste any sleepless nights over worrying. It all works out. And you know what? And and I would say, good for you. You really you just keep up the good work.
You're right. So um, having that energy, storing that energy instead of worrying could be used in action, isn't it? And that would be much more beneficial.
Absolutely. And you know what? I sort of think like I'm so lucky to have the values that I have because it makes my heart grow bigger, and I just feel like I'm lucky to have worked really hard to get the skills I need to be where I am today. And I think like I will get lots of people asking me, "Oh, I want to do what you're doing," and I have to say there's a lot of work to get where I am, but along the way, it's a whole lot of fun. And if I had the job I had today, 20 years ago, I don't think I would have been ready for it. So I sort of think I'm lucky that, well, I think I earned it,
Yeah,
and I think I have the skills to move it forward. But so I try to say to people, enjoy where you're at and learn from it, and
yeah,
then move. It's we all there's chapters in our lives that are being written as we're living them, and you know every chapter you bring something. Like a fun fact you may not know about me is that was in internal medicine before I was an ophthalmologist, and I have to say those 3 years were incredibly important in my life. But I'm an ophthalmologist, so how much do I use it? Internal medicine, I use it every day, all the time, and I don't regret it at all. I just think it is another skill set that I brought to the table.
yeah. Excellent pearls of wisdom there. Thank you very much for having us invite you and making time to come on the podcast. And we've learned a lot today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tina. And you know what? I admire what you're doing, and I'm so glad that we're having this conversation because you know what? There's a sisterhood here, and we all need to keep encouraging each other. So
Yes,
thank you so much.
yes, sisterhood. Thank you very much. Take care.
You too. Bye bye.